Okay, everybody. So we've now got around just under half an hour for some Q&A coming out of those discussions. So I'm going to move around the room, and I'm probably going to start right at the furthest end of the room. What questions have you got there that you would like to ask? If you tell me, I will repeat them to try and make sure everybody can hear the questions.
My question would be, um, when a resident makes a complaint, so for instance, I've raised a complaint to Fiona, and I know Fiona's team will handle it. Who has oversight of those complaints, and how are they monitored?
Okay, so we've got a question about complaints. Now, we've got our next session after this is going to have quite a big focus on complaints. So we've got a question, who monitors and oversees complaints? So our next session after the break is really, really focusing on the complaints side. But I am going to ask David to talk about how you particularly oversee and monitor complaints arising out of the repair service and what you do to learn from and keep a tab on what's going on in the repairs area.
So in the repair service, we do have a dedicated complaints team that deal with those first complaints, or what we call stage one complaints. So they make sure that the complaint is acknowledged in time, and the repairs that are raised in the complaint are completed, and then they monitor that through to a satisfactory outcome. In terms of the overall monitoring of it, the monitoring is done in customer services, and Matt will talk to you about that. What I would say is a big chunk of the complaints are about communication, that failure to communicate that either somebody hasn't turned up, or if they have turned up, they haven't completed the repair, and then it's not clear what will happen next. And sometimes some of those issues then go on for weeks. But certainly there's a dedicated complaints team in my division that have oversight of it, and they use the same system. There's a central team in Matt's area that keep oversight of it. And then we get weekly reports on progress and those that are outstanding and so forth and so on.
And just a secondary question. When that first complaint that has been, has gone to the first stage, and it's gone to the second stage, and it's gone through to completion, and then a second complaint is raised because actually the first issue hasn't been resolved, who then looks back and says, why wasn't that first complaint resolved? And why is it coming up again and again and again for the third time?
Okay, I'll just repeat that for the room, just as a quick follow-on question about how do we keep tab of when you think you've completed a complaint, but actually a little while later the issue has come back or something related has happened and you have to relook at it, and how do you keep a tab on those things that keep on coming up again and again and again?
Did you want to comment, Steve? So it's about learning lessons from complaints that are raised and then not completed, and it's those that come back time and time again. It's exactly that. And so, for instance, my stage one complaints team, there are systems of what we call Power BI that show us complaints that come back, show us topics that residents raise, and for instance, I get a monthly report on repeat complaints, things that come up time and time again. And often it's those repairs that, as I said, are not completed, or they're reported as completed and they come back again. Reported as completed and they come back again. And when we look at that, often it's, for instance, the subcontractors that we're using, that it's about contract management, making sure that the work is done, and then the appropriate post-inspection. So what's coming out of the reviews that we do, we can see those issues and then we can intervene and stop them. We get lots of information on what goes wrong, why it goes wrong, and what we need to do. And that is very much our focus.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. And a great start as well, straight into the heart of the issues. And I'm not I'm not going to make you wait till the end over there. I'm going to mix it up a bit, but I'm going to go to this table next. So who's going to ask a question for this table?
Something I'm interested in, but it was a lady over there that put the question, and she said about when L&Q are contracting out services to other people, how do they regulate the other people? How do they manage them? How do they supervise them? How do they choose them? How do they review them? So, for example, L&Q contract out to THCH our cleaning and our external maintenance, and it's a shambles. Let's just put it politely.
So for anyone who didn't hear that, it's a question about how we basically select and manage people who provide services on our behalf. How do we go about making sure they do a good enough job? We get the right people who do a good enough job. So I'll pass over, that's very specifically David.
So firstly, it's about who we bring in, the process we go through to, we call procure them, to make sure we get the right balance between the quality of what they say they're going to do and the price, with a really key focus on quality rather than price. The price is important, but we think quality is even more important. So for quite a number of the contracts that we have let, on the major works contract, it was 80% quality, 20% price. For the heating contractors, again, it was 80% quality, 20% price. So we think that's important. So make sure we're really clear of our expectations before we appoint, before we ask them to come and work for us, obviously to deliver services to you. But the most significant point is contract management. How do we manage those relationships? And it's fair to say, I mean, I used the point about inconsistency in the repair service. There's inconsistency in contract management. So we have and are taking steps to improve the way we contract manage our partners. We've created, for instance, in my division, a new commercial team that's been in place for about 6 months. And their role is not only to look at, make sure you are receiving value for money, paying the right price for the work that they do, but also crucially to contract manage them, to understand the quality of the work that they do. And similar arrangements in the repair service. Make sure the contract management is clear and takes place, albeit, again, I would say it's inconsistent. So we first think about who we procure, and so who we bring in to work for you, and then it's about making sure we manage them, but also take real tough decisions where we need to.
I'm going to keep on moving to make sure that every table has an opportunity to ask some questions, but it's a really, the issue of contract management is a really, really, really important issue to resident experience, because if you don't get those contracts right, the experience falls down at the end. I'm going to go over to this side of the room now. So I'm going to go to this back table here. And can I ask a question from this table?
So we had a really good discussion. I think it's probably fair to say there was a feeling that not a lot has changed within a long period of time. So I think it's 3 out of 10 for this table was the kind of overall. But I think really pleased with the development, and I think there was a strong sense of kind of the direction seems to be the right direction. I think we've already covered quite a lot on the contractual side, and that was a big concern on this table. Contractors not turning up, people concerned around things were said that they would happen and they didn't happen. But an equally important concern that was raised here was going from 500 to 20 or 30, are you going to have sufficient coverage? Is there going to be enough people? Is there a danger that in fact you're not going to be able to cover as much ground as you want to? And that was kind of voiced. And then I think the other big thing to say that was voiced was the key connection between poor communication and poor satisfaction. And poor communication and accountability, in particular, not getting feedback, not hearing, not being told when people would turn up, not having calls returned. One example of someone having to tell the neighbourhood housing lead and then going back and having to call L&Q separately. So I guess the other question from this table is, how can we have confidence in accountability and communication getting better, was the kind of bigger question from this table.
So I'm going to ask I'm going to pose the communication question to Steve.
Yeah.
And I'm sure from what I heard, this was a theme that was coming up on quite a few of the tables. So try and get that right. And this, I'll hand over to Steve on that one.
Yeah. So and it came when we were going through the TSM results, and again going through the verbatim comments, it came out really clearly about that. So I'm responsible for corporate communication, but every single person that you interact, we're focusing on getting the communication right on that. Recognised again, we rely on third parties to do a lot of work, contractors, and the communication has not been good enough there. One of the challenges that we know we have, that we're putting right at the moment through our transformation programs to give you assurance, is sometimes that communication is poor, quite frankly, because of the way that we are organised as an organisation and the way that our systems talk to each other. So we are in the middle of a massive investment of those systems. If you call our contact centre about a repair, the time that you take on that call, the fact that you have to call in the first place, the time that you might have to wait, is a reflection of the complexity that we have as an organisation sitting behind it. And so that's not your problem, that's our problem, and that's our challenge to sort out. And we have a multi-million pound transformation programme looking at that, simplifying our systems. We've also done a huge piece about looking at our operating models, so where teams sit, how we organise ourselves, and just to make it kind of simpler in the way that you interact. Some of those communication issues come through. L&Q colleagues have got the same issues talking to departments to each other, and so that's the bit that we are looking at fixing. And certainly, we're going to talk a little bit about in that session later when we set out our visions for the next 5 years about how we're doing that. But just to reassure you, there is a lot of work going on that. From the communications team point of view, we're also doing a load of work around culture and sort of letters, the information that you get out. I mean, I've seen some in the past, and I'm not surprised that people are confused about what we're saying about it. So they're doing a whole load of work with teams again about be simple, be clear, say what you're doing, stick to that information. And that is, that's going out across the organisation at the moment. So two things: working with teams on that communication point, but also there is a huge investment in our systems to make it easier. We don't really have much of an online offer at the moment. For you to choose to do it if you will, but we will in the coming years, because that's what we're investing in at the moment.
So how do we as residents get the assurance that you're putting in place that actually
Okay, so for everybody who couldn't hear that, it was how do we as residents get the assurance that the plans you are putting in place will actually happen and work, which is a really, really heart of the issue kind of question there. And I can direct that one at Steve.
I'll start at the top level, and then David might want to come in sort of how managing on a basis. So I said at the outset, one of the key bits about the TSMs is accountability. We are sharing some results here, and some that clearly are not where we want to be, and we expect to be held to account for those. So we have many members of our Resident Services Board who are in the room today, which is the top level, the resident governance structure. They look at those TSMs, they hold us to account for them. We have got to say in our report, so you're seeing the first element of it today. In 2 weeks' time, we will be publicly sharing those, and we'll be setting out what our plans are. And the Resident Service Board, Neighbourhood Committee and others will be holding us to account of, this is what you'll say you're going to address that point. What are you doing in the next 12 months? And they'll be looking at that through the year and making sure that we are doing that. So is total transparency is the point about holding us to account. They are out there. They're the same methodology that everybody is using. It's your views as well, so it's not about our perceptions of it. It's your views, and there are lots of formal mechanisms where we capture that data. So that's on a sort of global level.
I'll ask David just on how do we know the things you're doing in the repairs service, particularly maybe the repairs change project, are going to deliver and make a difference to residents?
I think you will see it in the results and the satisfaction results and your experience of the service. And actually, things like this, a year on from where we are today, you should see some evidence that there is improvement. Now, I've been at L&Q for 3.5 years, and if I think where we were 3.5 years ago to where we are today, we're in a different place. And are we doing the right things to improve the service? I think we are. You heard from Steve about the transformation program, but now we've got a major works program in place, and we've just finished the first year improving thousands of homes. Over the next 14 years, we will do even more. As I said, the stock is deteriorating at a quite rapid rate, particularly over the next 3 years. Half of the stock will become non-decent without investment. So we know we need to go and improve it before it becomes non-decent. On the repair service, we do understand the things that we need to do to improve it. Now, Tim made the point about reducing the number of contractors we use. Will that mean we have sufficient coverage? It's an excellent point. The reason that we're using 600 contractors, 500 were from Plantific, was because we needed the Plantific service at the point when we started using them about 3 years ago. We had about over 50,000 repairs outstanding, waiting to be completed. What Plantific does is check a trade, sophisticated version of check a trade. It gave us access to all of those contractors. It meant that we could halve the work in progress. We're about 25,000 repairs that are outstanding. So that was useful, but there's lots of downsides to using that many contractors. Now, some of them we use once. Some of them we use 3 or 4 times. Now, how do we manage them? How do we contract manage contractors we may only use once or a few more than that? So what we're going to do is reduce supply chain so that, as I said, contractors are really clear about our expectations and your expectations, the type of service that you must receive consistently. And we think reducing that to 20 or 30 contractors is enough to cover it, make sure they're the right contractors, as well as increasing the productivity of our workforce too. So our operatives, 230 of them, 240 of them at the moment, and focus on straightforward reactive repairs, completing them right first time, and the bigger work we give to others, 20 or 30, who are able to deal with those repairs well. And then the expectation is, given those and the other changes that we're put in place, that your experience when you report a repair, it gets done well. If it isn't, and when I look at complaints, the complaints that I see, it's because, as I said, either we didn't turn up, or we didn't fix it, and then you chased. Nobody told you what was going to happen next. And what we expect to see is the instance of that reduce, the instances of us turning up and doing it right first time and completing it increase, and then our satisfaction results that we receive from feedback from you start to move in the right direction. That's how you get assurance that we're doing the right things.
Okay, thank you. And I'm really keen that we get to hear from as many people as possible. So I'm going to ask if we can try and keep the answers moving quite quickly from here on in. I said I was going to get. I said I was going to get bossy. So we've got someone over here.
My name is Marion, and my question is that I think many residents from East Kent relate to. When you say stop deteriorating, you've got to realise that I understand that's property business for you, but there are people living in those properties, and we're not numbers, we're real people with real emotion, real problems. And some of the most vulnerable members of the community, society, social housing, they're in social housing for a reason. And their voices are not being heard, they are intimidated. Many times when they've had major repairs that need to be reported, they've been told to shut up and just accept the way the situation is. You're lucky to have a home, you're lucky to have a roof over your head. And after a while, when people are trying to just struggling to put food on the table, cost of living and all of that, it gets very tiring, and people are suffering mental health, anxiety issues, and the trust issue is simply not there. They don't have that trust with an LQ to be able to deliver. Because then there are many members, older members, poor members, who are really struggling. The elder generation, the younger generation, they're really struggling, whether it's language barriers, whether it's whichever they're from, they are really struggling. They're struggling to have that trust issue with NQ. So when you say contractors and when you say housing stock, you're talking from a business point of view, but you are not taking into consideration real people who are really struggling, and the communication, the IT services that are changing. For many elderlies, it's very difficult for them to suddenly have, to accept the learning skills which are beyond their ability to learn, and they're taken advantage of. For many people with disabilities, or many hidden disabilities, it's very difficult to stay in tune of what they're supposed to say. So when people come in and say, you need to sign this, they don't have the right questions to think. It's only once they've signed something with jargon which they don't understand, they sign, and later on they're told, oh, you signed up, and they don't know what they've signed, and they have no means to follow it through.
And the question is?
So the question is, how do you build that trust with the most vulnerable members of society? It's not a business, there's real people that are really struggling.
So I'll just quickly summarise for anyone who didn't hear at the other end of the room, is how do you build trust for the most vulnerable members of society? Remembering, talking about things from a business side here, but actually this is people's homes, and there are people's homes who may have got a lot going on in their lives and may be quite vulnerable in society. So, I mean, I'm going to ask probably David first from the repair service perspective, and that really fundamental question, because it goes to the heart of who we are and why we exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comment and question. I mean, what I would say is my apologies if it appeared that we would just focus on numbers and stock, because of course everything that we do is for you. So, it is about people. And of course we've given the numbers because they're important, but even more important are you that live in the homes that you do, and we need to make sure that you're living in good housing conditions and you receive excellent services, and that is our plan. So it's fair to say we have done a great deal of work on thinking about types of services that residents get, particularly vulnerable residents. And we've done some great deal of soul searching, and certainly feedback we have from the Ombudsman about the account we take of vulnerabilities in their various forms, and making sure that firstly we understand the vulnerability, and that we also make sure it's not just about a service that is one size fits all, because clearly one size fits all doesn't work. Real diversity out there, and we need to understand it first, and then make sure we think about how we deliver our services to make sure they are appropriate to meet the needs. And we've done a great deal of work, and we are doing more. I'm sure Matt will talk about it when he talks about complaints and the local housing management service. So we do see it much wider than that, and we're doing a great deal of work to make sure we adapt our services that take account of it. And the point about trust takes time, doesn't it? Because particularly if you've been an L&Q resident for some time. Exactly. So as I said, 3.5 years ago, I joined. We're in a different place that we are. We're a different place from where we were 3.5 years ago. We'll be in a better place next year, a better place after that. Trust is built by evidence and delivering on what you said you're going to deliver. And absolutely, the exec team, our board are really clear. The commitments that we've made, we will deliver them.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes left to finish with this session. We've got a few tables to go. So what I'm going to ask is take a question from this table and that table, and then have some answers, and a question from these three tables, and then try and make sure we get through everyone having a chance. I'm going to start. There's somebody willing to put their hand up there, so I'm going to go there first because I can see you're eager.
I just want to ask a question. So, good morning. It's regarding the maintenance teams. Now, when we book appointments, we find that with one repair, you'll come 1, 2, 3, 4 times just to fix one thing. We take the day off work, and we have to stay at home with no pay. If you cancel, you write the call. We sit at home. Nobody's told us that you cancelled the appointment, and we have to chase you up to find out why you can't turn up. When you do turn up, you can't fix it. You'll say, oh, you'll look at it, leave. Somebody else needs to come. Third time, somebody else needs to come. The fourth time, somebody else needs to come. And this is over at a span of a few months. And why is it taking so long so that we have to have one repair done? You're wasting 3 or 4 appointments, which you give to other people on one repair. And what are you going to do to communicate with the other teams to make sure that it's done the first time?
Okay, thank you. So first of the quick rapid fire questions there, which is what are you going to do to deal with multiple appointments that you're sort of wasting residents' time and probably our organisation's time as well. This table over here, if you've been yet, sorry, I'm losing track now. This table hasn't been yet, so this table.
Our customer's question to someone else. We want to know what are you getting from the quality of repairs, especially where subcontractors are involved. And I think it's also about how are you monitoring whether those particular subcontractors are not in subcontracting someone else. Yeah, that's but we had the experience of someone turning up on the doorstep and not, no badge, nothing. So I've been sent by my friend to be the job.
So the second question there is about how are you really keeping proper tabs on subcontractors and making sure they're not subcontracting. So two rapid fire questions, and then we'll try and get to the other group and finish off.
Okay, they're quick responses. I mean, that's exactly why we want to reduce the number of subcontractors we use from 600 down to about 20 or 30, because the simple answer is it's really difficult to contract manage and post-inspect all of those arrangements. And not that we'd want to look at them all, but it's really difficult to manage and make sure we've got oversight that they're doing the right thing. You take that down to 20 or 30, we can be really clear whether they are delivering it, whether they're subbing it, which does happen, and then takes no account that it's your home. So very much changing the arrangement so it is easier to do that, and that's why we're making the changes. On the point about multiple visits, and again, this comes through really strongly in our complaints. Not acceptable. I apologise for that. We need to do better, and the changes that we are making, renewing more, repairing less, will mean that improves. Making sure we diagnose the repair at the point you report it, typically diagnose it correctly, typically through the contact centre. Changes we're making, make sure the right operative turns up, but the tools to do the repair right first time. The evidence is right first time is improving, but for every repair we get right, there are a number that we get wrong. And our absolute focus, that laser focus, is on those repairs that we get wrong to make sure that we can do them right first time.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to go to these two tables here to have their chance. Yeah, so I'll go back and then forward and say take a question from each and then put them to the panel.
And it's a great question for Nadia. Second, how realistic are your plans to fix the LED jigsaw puzzle? Because a lot have to be used. So, how do you ensure it's got the right pieces and the right pieces in the right place? So you say this stuff about 20-30 work. So is this really real?
So question there of how reassured are you? You've got the right plans in place to fix the L&Q jigsaw puzzle that we heard about earlier from Steve, of people not knowing who's doing what and confusion behind the scenes. Is it realistic? And then from this table,
there was two questions. The first one was about how confident are you that our direct maintenance service can actually get the repairs right? The experience on the table is that they're not. And the second one was around, if we are doing this investment in our homes, what opportunities do we have to do other adaptations, such as solar panels, things like that?
Okay, so so we have that question, which I will direct to Steve.
Yes, yeah,
and the second question there was about sort of how confident are you in the direct maintenance, what you're doing with direct maintenance that can actually make a difference, and about taking the opportunity to make adaptations, particularly for environmental reasons and other reasons, whilst you're doing the major works. I'm going to ask you to be really quick in your answers because we've got our next slot coming on soon.
So with that, Steve, being really quick, and it's a brilliant and difficult question. So the very simple one is, I think they're both realistic, and also we don't have any choice, because I think what we're hearing really here is we have to do better than we are at the moment. So that's the first thing. In terms of the confidence around that, we had a new corporate plan 3 years ago, which purposely shifted investment from new homes into existing homes. So that was a conscious decision we made for all the reasons that David has highlighted why it was necessary. Now that was a massive thing. It's the biggest program that anybody has put together, and it took some time to put together, and it's happened. It's the first year of that, and there was a real specific reason we focused on repairs first. We are focusing on all of the other bits, and I have confidence that those will happen because of the resource that we've got behind it, and making sure that we have real clarity around what we're doing, that it is focused on existing homes. What I would say as my quick answer to this is we've got a number of sessions, and at the end of the day we'll be talking through our future visions, and one of those things is your feedback on how realistic they are. So when we've all done our pitch to you about exactly where we think our plans are going and what that looks like in 5 years time, this event is one of the ways in which we're capturing how realistic those are, what your priorities are. So that's kind of, at the end of the day, I think we need to ask that question of ourselves again, is my quick answer to that.
And then David,
Too quick.
very quick.
Yeah. Am I confident? Yes. What was it? No, let's say a little bit more in that front. So I think the problem with the repair service, we've asked the repair service to do more than it has the capacity to do. What it's good at are really straightforward, small, reactive repairs. It's not good at repairs that are multi-trade and that are bigger in size. So what we call minor works. Not quite major works that can be delivered from the major works programme. They're just more complicated work. Service is not geared up for it. And in fact, when I look at our complaints, it's those repairs that go wrong. So what we've already done is pulled that work away from the repair service, so the repair service can just focus on reactive repairs. And therefore I'm really confident that, aligned with the other changes that we're making, that repair service will improve. On the sustainability point, the major works programme and the partners that deliver it, we're focusing first on insulation, so what we call fabric first, up to 2030, and then after 2030 we will look at things like solar panels, because they've got the capacity to be able to do them, and things like heat pumps. Heat pumps will be delivered in homes from 2030 onwards. So we are thinking about it, but for the moment we're just thinking about retaining heat through insulation.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for really, really insightful and challenging questions, first and foremost, and to Steve and David for their session.